Vision Spring Inc., a women-owned and operated diversity and inclusion consulting firm. I'm going to do just a quick round of introductions because our time today is short and I want to make the most of it. But I do encourage all of you to read our panelists' full bios on the Diversity Women Conference website. What is important to know is each of our panelists are experts in the field, have been doing this work for many years, and bring that experience, expertise, and unique perspective to the conversation. I want to start by welcoming Miranda Bennett King. She is the Diversity and Inclusion Leader for Inclusion Groups and Programs at the Hartford. Welcome, Miranda.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Shelton Goode. He is President and CEO of Icarus Consulting, a veteran-owned consulting firm specializing in diversity and inclusion. Shelton, thanks for being here today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Next, join me in welcoming Dr. Andrea Hendricks. She is the Senior Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion Strategy for Cerner. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Susan Stith, who is the Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, Foundation, and Civic Affairs for Cigna. Now that's a lot of responsibility there. Thanks, Susan, and welcome.
Thank you.
So today we are here to discuss how we can have conversations about race and equity in our workplaces. Our employees are coming to work with a range of emotions, including anger, resentment, fear, guilt, and even sadness. So in this discussion, we're going to explore how we can create spaces where people can share feelings, be open and honest, vulnerable, and respectful. So let's get started. I think we can all agree that disparity and racial injustice is nothing new. But in the wake of George Floyd's death, things do feel different. So I'd like to ask all of you, what's changed? Why the amplified focus? And why do we need to be more open to having conversations about race and equity in our workplaces? And I would like all of you to weigh in on this question, but Andrea, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you so much, Robin, for convening us today. And certainly this is an important topic and certainly a question. The profound thought of what's changed kind of leaves me in the middle because I think it struck a chord with everyone. It's about time that we have a deep conversation about this. Citizens all across this world have longed for greater understanding and even not beyond understanding, looking at dismantling racism or racist act or practices in our community, certainly in our country. There have been rallies and protests before. I think now there's been more sustained focus, more widespread efforts in terms of actors and businessmen and women and sports industry really coming to a point of recognition that this is time. And so one, I would share technology and social media. When you record a profound murder of George Floyd and it is projected for nearly 9 minutes, I don't think the narrative can be changed. The narrative is real. And it came a time when there was a pandemic going on and high unemployment and individuals at home watching the conversion of the forces come together. And it meant a lot more. The emotions were high. Individuals are fed up for historical decades and decades and years of injustice and racism. So I think with this heightened visibility and impact that is endured, I think people are ready for a better conversation, and that's what changed. The final thing that I will share is too often we've heard the stories, and we've had a fable in front of us. We've been in a bubble that we're living, that everything's great, everything's phenomenal, everything's wonderful. And at that point in time, I think individuals of all background, races, creed, color, recognize it's not. And so there was a widespread, let's unpack our blind eye viewpoint and really focus in on that everything's not wonderful and the technology, social media, the pandemic, high unemployment, and the converging forces really caused us to say it's time, and that's what's changed.
So a perfect storm, really.
Right.
Absolutely.
And Shelton, why do you think we're now more willing to address these topics that have really been traditionally taboo in our workplaces and even in our social circles? And now people not only seem willing, but actually ready to have these conversations.
Yeah, so let me respond by saying the circumstances that are motivating the change are not new. All you have to do is think back to several years where we were just talking about Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Trayvon. Now here we are in 2020. So the circumstances are not, that's giving impetus to the change is not new. What is new is the fact that the movement is not just US based. I have clients that are global, and particularly 2 clients in the United Kingdom that have shared with me that there is much sustained protest in the UK as it is in Chicago, LA, and other US cities. Number 2, because as we know, we have I've been in-house and external, and clients have been focused internally, but now they're being compelled by external drivers, and they can't. Before it was what happens outside the 4 walls, we don't deal with, we're just going to deal with internally. That's the companies that were dealing with it internally. Now they're having to deal with things outside. Employees have been saying 2 things for a long time. Why can't we have more workplace flexibility and work from home? And companies would, some would meet that with, we don't want to talk about that today. And then, of course, there was always, we're not going to talk about race, religion, politics, or anything like that. And so now employees are showing up, as we know, to work, and they want to talk about those things. What companies have to do, and what I'm trying to help my clients do, is to create a safe environment for employees to have those conversations, but also be able to make sure the conversations are constructive and productive and can lead to actionable, measurable, sustainable results, so that as we return to the workplace, employees will see that there is something different going forward. So that's what I think is different.
Thank you, Shelton. And Miranda, I think that this has become important to not only Black people, not only people of color, but it seems like all races, ethnicities, genders are now wanting to be engaged in part of this conversation. I want to ask that same question, but from a slightly different perspective. Why do you think so many people now want to engage in this conversation?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. And I would echo what's been said already. When you think about it, at the end of the day, we have wanted change for so long. We've wanted it. But again, I heard the term perfect storm. Really, it was time, the conditions were right, things came together. And so it just really gave voice to what was happening, and everybody saw an opportunity, and people totally took advantage of that opportunity. The other point or a piece that I think about is Generation Z, right? So if you think about this generation, you're talking a very diverse generation. So where years ago, Gen X, you had Black and white, now you have, biracial people that are saying, I'm a person, regardless of what my race is. So I think that's really fueling it as well. You're talking about a generation that really is very open to emerging social trends. So that's another piece that I think adds on to it and why you see this issue being amplified today.
Absolutely. And Susan, I want to ask you this question in a slightly different way. We've talked about why people want to talk about it, why there's a willingness to talk about it. I'd like you to weigh in on why we actually need to talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin, for the question. Thank you all for your responses. because, I was listening to all of you all, and you were talking about pandemic, the two pandemics that we're really encountering right now. And so that's one of the driving forces. The other driving force is, back to Miranda, what you talked about. Why do we need to talk about it? Gen Z has never lived in a world without technology, ever. And so they will amplify it, whether or not you want to amplify it or not. They will talk about it outside the doors and within your organization. There's other data that supports millennial women make decisions about where they work by your commitment to the community. These are all real things that impact us from a corporate standpoint every single day. And then the one thing that I heard a couple of you talk about is that, we talk about the moment, right? So we've had many moments. I'm in St. Louis. Ferguson is outside my office door, to be perfectly honest. That was a moment 6 years ago that we started progressing and making change. This is a movement. What we're seeing today is that movement as a result of all the things we've talked about, the convergence of the two pandemics, to be honest, systemic racism and COVID converging at the same time. That's impacted us in a way that we never would have anticipated. And then we see the impact and amplification of social media. That's real. And again, I talk a lot. I have two kids. One's a millennial and one's a Gen Z. And I am watching this play out in their world in a whole new way. And that they will not accept it. They will not tolerate certain behaviors, and they have an expectation. And then the one thing I want to close with in this is John Lewis, we buried him. We buried someone extremely important to this whole conversation. And he talked a lot about good trouble. And this is what we have a responsibility to do something in that vein. But then the quote that I take to heart is when he said, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. You have to say something and you have to do something. And that's where we are. This is a movement in this world that we're in right now.
Yeah. And you know what? We lost C.K. Vivian the same day.
Yes.
We lost. So it's been a kind of a trying time, I think. Inspirational and trying times.
Absolutely.
So Susan, I know Cigna has been on their DE&I journey for quite some time. And yet these are, I think we can all acknowledge, unique and challenging times. It's different, like we've all already talked about. So I'd like to ask you to share, what are some specific ways Cigna is actually addressing this issue? And if you could even share with us, what are some of your biggest successes and what are some of those challenging moments that you've had as you've been navigating this new environment?
So another good question, Robin, and you've been on the journey with me, right, for a very long time. So I appreciate you and also helping kind of put some of it in perspective in the way that we look at it. So what have we been doing? We've done a lot. So as we mentioned, a lot of this, the impetus a little bit was with the murder of George Floyd. But then we've been on that journey and it got propelled a little bit. So some immediate actions that we did following that, we had an enterprise-wide leadership joint statement. That was impactful and that was needed. And so went out to all 75,000 of our employees, and it was all of our leaders signing and saying, here's what we believe in, right? So zero tolerance for discrimination and for racism within our organization. And it was powerful and was needed. We then amplified that on social media so that people could see that external posting of what our leadership team was saying. We've done listening sessions. We did immediately out of the gate, within a week, we started listening sessions. They're called Inspiring Inclusive Conversations. And we've done 30 plus sessions for up to almost 9,000 to 10,000 of our employees, if not more. And that's within, a total of 3 weeks. The D&I team was able to pull that together. We've done internal blogs and posts. We created a D&I toolkit that had messages and talking points for leaders, because some leaders were struggling with, what do I say? And in one of our Inspiring Inclusive Conversations, we have a slide that says silence is basically not an option. It can be definite. Mm-hmm. And so we talked about what that meant. We created an EAP recorded session. So our external clients and stakeholders have access to much of the same pieces that we put together. An employee town hall for all of our employees, a client town hall. We had Magic Johnson. We did it in partnership with Diversity Inc. We had Dr. Valerie Rice, who is the president and dean of the Morehouse School of Medicine. So we've done a lot. Oh, and one of the other things we've done is we had a pledge that all of our employees can sign that say we stand together and we're committed to ensuring zero tolerance and racism within our organization. So that's just a little bit of what we've done. We also just sent out a 5-year commitment and acknowledgement that we will build equity and equality within our organization. And there are a lot of pieces attached to that. So where are the challenges? When I said getting leaders to have those dialogues, right? And so but we're getting past that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but a lot of work has gone into this. And this is in a month, right, that we've done some of this.
I hear a lot of people saying it's uncomfortable. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to be under attack. And I always say to people, well, people of color, Black people have been uncomfortable and under attack for centuries. So, get over yourself and deal with it. So put yourself in that position for a short time so that we can all be part of the solution instead of the problem.
Yes, you absolutely do say that because you've sat through some of the sessions. So thank you, Robin. All right.
Andrea, I'd like to turn the floor over to you. And I know that, Andrea, you've been in this space for a long time. You bring a lot of expertise, but Cerner as an organization is fairly new to their journey. So what challenges are unique to a company starting their journey in this current climate, and how have you lended your expertise to manage these conversations with that in mind?
Well, thank you, Robin, and I certainly appreciate Susan's journey, as it's so important to have best practice approaches or even next practice approaches in your toolkit as you're challenging or being proactive or reactive. We started our official journey, I would say, in October of 2018. For those of you who are not aware of Cerner Corporation, as one of a leader in healthcare IT, a global engine in that space, and we have two lenses: the healthcare space and the technology space, that have a profound intersection to diversity and inclusion, focused on the social determinants of health, as well as how do you provide technology solutions and products for all. So when I joined the company, thankfully prior to COVID and certainly the social and civil unrest, we had a strategic platform and pillar to work across workforce, workplace, marketplace, and community. No different than most companies as they approach a comprehensive stream. Prior to joining Cerner, it's been drifts into more compliance focus and development focus, not necessarily strategy focus. So we're trying to bring a strategy that is important to all, not only internally but externally with our clients and certainly our communities that we so serve all over the world. But I would say starting this journey, it's not the challenge, because we had the commitment from the CEO, we had commitment from our leaders, and even the board members are asking about where's diversity in our journey as our culture goes through transformation. I would say as we move towards this year, the challenge that we had is building capacity in addressing things that happen in the moment. So Susan's talked about the moment, and we need to be nimble, flexible, and ready to address that. And I think our commitment from our top, the tone from the top positioned us and poised us well to do some of that. In terms of piloting, you don't have time to pause and pilot when you're going through a storm. You need to come out and have strategic direction, and you need to come out and have a strategic voice in ensuring that you're able to communicate to your constituents, and more importantly, the internal associates, how important this is. So our CEO stepped up and our executive team stepped up to make some commitments that diversity, one, is going to be important and valued at our organization. I would flip the side of the commitment to associate engagement. They really drove that conversation about, what needs to be changed. We provided similar to Susan, a platform for associates to express their concerns and express opportunities that we need to address as it relates to the social civil unrest. And so we pivoted to providing resources and direction to help not only our associates engage in some way, but how do leaders really commit to being effective in that? We're not 100% there. We're at the beginning of our journey, unlike Susan and maybe several others that are in the audience. And I think that's okay as long as we stay committed to that, focused on that. We need to have deep, smart tools, resources to be effective, and best practices that guide us to make sure we get things done. This is a bitter part of our history. It's not going anywhere. And so the more that we can continue to retool, refine, and refocus and break through, I think we will achieve great success for that. So I'll end with this. We talk about we don't have time to pause and really spend time, reflect. We have deep, smart individuals that work at Cerner in our development team and our diversity team, and executives that care about this. And I know over time, those resources will be more impactful. So you need CEO engagement. You need your CHRO engagement. You need your associates at the table, your associate business resource groups giving you feedback on how you can be effective in this area. And then you develop those tools and resources and move forward with executing on the promise. So I hope that even though we're new at onboarding diversity in our history, we're not new in designing and developing practices that we know are important and that matter and should be a part of our culture.
And let me ask you this. You had mentioned there was you have a platform where you have been enabling employees to share their concerns and what they want to talk about. And this is a panel on how do we talk about race and equity. What are you willing to share? Like, what are some of those concerns that emerged as a result of that platform? And what do you plan on doing in order to address those concerns?
So we had 3 ways for associate engagement. We developed an internal Yammer page, and so we allowed associates freely over from June 1 until we still have it live today to do 2 things: make a commitment to diversity and inclusion, a statement, whatever they want to share, and then also to share their thoughts about opportunities. And so we had over thousands of responses through our, examining those channels, the feedback channels. And we focused on, there were 7 themes that our associates said that we need to do better. And most of you know these. 1, diversifying our leadership, making sure that there's visible leadership that reflects their community. Number 2, looking at our wellness resources, and these aren't in order, just the things that they talked about: wellness resources and benefits, EAP assistance that reflects social justice and social consciousness efforts, that we need to begin to look at that. Another area that they talked about is to communicate diversity more, not only during the cultural and celebration months, but in good and bad times, develop a communication form for that. And then I'll share one more of the 7 that I think is important, is to ensure that we have voices of the associates all throughout our efforts. So leveraging our internal associates who have been there, they're tenured there, they're new right out of college, and they have great ideas, to ensure that you have listening sessions ongoing, that you have focus groups ongoing, and that you take their associate engagement feedback that they provide on yearly or pulse checks serious, that we're ensuring that associates know that we're reading their remarks and responding to their remarks. So from that, I'll end with this and share with you, we have several ways that we are building capacity to ensure the voices of our associates are there. Our associate business resource groups launched this year, so we have 8 of those, and some companies I know in the audience have those going, so we launched those. We also have a diversity practice group that we launched, which are business leaders selected by their executives that will meet monthly to identify how business leaders, managers and above should be engaged with diversity and inclusion. So in the business unit engagement. The final thing I'll share is an inclusion council. We are launching an inclusion council that will take a look at not only internally, but externally, the social consciousness efforts from a volunteer perspective, VTO. We just launched VTO days for associates to engage in community groups. Cerner has not had those before, and very proud about that. But allowing our community organizations to sit at the table, give us insight along with our executives on how we can partner together to come up with community solutions related to diversity and inclusion. How can we build capacity there? So I'll share that we are creating some forms that will allow the voices of the associates to do that, and we're taking their commitments and their conversations seriously. The CEO in our town hall just a couple of weeks ago, we spent several minutes talking about his commitment along with the executive leadership team, and they're going to commit to 4 or 5 things as an executive team for diversity and inclusion for the rest of this year. So in addition to whatever we committed prior to this, they have added on additional commitments for success. And I think, again, along with Susan and Dr. Shelton Goode and Miranda, these are things that many organizations are doing, regardless of the timing and the moment. It is a movement, and we have to keep developing those strategies for success. So I hope that gives you some ideas on what we're doing to have productive conversations and productive solutions and productive resources for our associates in our community. We're on beginning our journey, and so stay tuned on our efforts for effectiveness.
Great, thank you. And Miranda, I know the Hartford, you've been doing this work also for quite a long time as an organization and as a leader in this space. So I'd like to ask you, taking the conversation specifically back to how we have conversations about race and equity in our workplaces, what is the Hartford doing right now to create not only safe, but reflecting on some of the conversations in this morning's keynote, those brave spaces where people can share their feelings and engage in honest and productive dialogue around race. So what are you doing specifically around dialogue and having those conversations?
Absolutely. Thank you, Robin. So I'll share a few things that we're doing at the Hartford. And it's interesting, as I listen to the others, some similarities are emerging.
Sure.
So first and foremost, I'll share that we've had a number of panel discussions. But the reason I bring this point up in terms of panel discussions is because not only have we had employees on the panels to share their personal experiences so that people have an understanding of what others may be going through, we've had our CEO be a part of a panel, as well as executive leaders who have been able to role model what we're asking employees to do. Meaning we had, and I'm going to say specifically, 2 white male executive leaders in our organization engage in a conversation on race. And you could tell there were times where they weren't sure what to say, how to say it. But again, that created that safe space to say to employees, if they don't really know what good looks like or what should be said, then I'm okay. I can lean in and have those conversations. So that's one example. I'll share a couple more and I'll be quick. So also from a blogging perspective. So again, we do have a platform at the Hartford where employees can openly, willingly blog about whatever is top of mind. And we've been doing this for several years now. What I found fascinating is when the George Floyd murder occurred, from that moment until maybe a couple of days, we were up to 100 blogs where one person started, and I believe the title of the blog was Being Black in America. That transcended into Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and it just organically grew from there to where people are even talking about, I have been silent. And now I've been awakened. And so now I want to engage and have discussions. And so I'm looking for tips, tricks, tools to tell me where to go from here. But I am now aware of what's happening and I want to do my part. So I think that is helpful because that's in a movement from employees. It's really employees encouraging other employees to share their experiences. Mm-hmm. At the Hartford specifically, about 2 years ago, we launched our Courageous Conversations framework. And so in our space, our framework, as to what you said, Robin, was really designed to create those safe spaces, to create those spaces where you can engage in dialogue across difference. So the way that we approached it is we wanted to make sure that employees saw this as a life skill, one that you could use inside the company as well as externally. Yeah. So we worked with Korn Ferry and we trained about 80 facilitators throughout our organization as facilitators. So we gave them the tools, tricks, resources that they needed, all the way down to guardrails. So when you start the conversation, you want to create that safe space. And how do you do that? You go over some guardrails. We even have an escalation process. So should it go from productive to combative? We have measurements in place so that people do really feel that they are safe in the space and they can share what's truly top of mind. Give you a couple of stats. So the facilitators, they actually host smaller circles. So we normally don't do circles that are bigger than 15. Because if you talk about safe space, you want to give people the platform to be able to say what's on their mind, but it's a small enough circle to, again, create the comfort, right, to protect that psychological safety. And so lucky, I guess I shouldn't say lucky, but I'm going to say lucky for us, we've been at this now a couple of years. So when everything started to hit, we were already having conversations on race, on religion, on gender, even COVID. We've had conversations on anxiety and fears relative to COVID. So it's not new for us. Mm-hmm. I'll share though that in the recent months, we've had about 40 organized smaller circles where we've had over 500 employees engage in discussions on race alone specifically. And then again, I'll emphasize here, similar to the panel discussions, we've had our CEO as well as executive leaders all the way down to frontline. So we've had a myriad of employees have shown up to these conversations, have participated in those conversations. And so that's really worked very well in our favor because I can see that courageous conversations are starting to shift our culture to one that feels more inclusive. Employees are starting to trust and be vulnerable.
Like that.
Yeah. And then just the last point I'll add is our employee resource groups are a big and integral part of helping us with courageous conversations. So they're looking at issues that are specific to their demographics, and we have 9 employee resource groups, and they are teasing out conversations for their specific demographics. And with that, we've had 67 of our almost 260, 270 courageous conversations have been led by employee resource groups. So they're helping us to move the needle when it comes to creating that safe space as well.
And were they given those facilitation tools as well that you talked about with Korn Ferry?
Yeah, so
were they prepped to lead those?
Intentionally, we selected individuals from our employee resource groups to be a part of that cohort of facilitators. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Great, wonderful. And Shelton, I want to call on you because you bring a very unique perspective to this conversation as someone who worked for many, many years as an internal diversity and inclusion leader, but now as an external consultant, you know firsthand how important it is to prepare for these kinds of conversations and this kind of work. So I'd like to ask you to lend that perspective and share with the participants listening today, what are some things they can do to properly prepare for having these kinds of conversations? You said it at the beginning of this discussion, that are actually productive and lead to actionable items, as opposed to just, you know, combative conversations where people are just going at each other.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Not only have I been a chief diversity officer for companies, but excuse me for a second, get rid of that. Y'all told me to make sure we do that again, and I knew it was going to happen. And not only have I been a chief diversity officer for companies, but I've also was the diversity leader for companies who found themselves involved in a class action racial discrimination lawsuit. So if you can imagine being the direct target of wanting to see change being compelled by your own employees. And I will tell you, as much as they want to talk about the things that are top of mind, what they want more than anything is change.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it can't be conversation for the sake of conversation. We have to make sure that managers are equipped to have those conversations, but you have to be more equipped to make sure that you follow through on actions that that employees want to see happen. And so what I'm encouraging my clients to do is to use these combined crises as a platform for change. I have a lot of large enterprise global companies, and these companies are your traditional hierarchical top-down organizations steeped in tradition and culture and are slow to change. And I'm saying, hey, let's use this as an opportunity to change. So we've done with my clients, we've done a lot of the same things that you've heard these great organizations haven't done. We've had education to equip managers, and we've brought in the very best. We brought in Mary Frances Winters and Tim Wise to help CEOs role model and learn how to lean into discomfort and talk about these things. But then more importantly, we've done things like in organizations, have had one client, they've had a seize the moment week where they had activities going for an entire week that again included a lot of the activities we've heard. Had another client that did a diversity stand up. In the utility sector, they have safety stand downs when they have crises.
Mm-hmm.
In this situation, we had a diversity stand up, and they were all focused on equipping managers to manage diverse work teams and create equitable and inclusive workplaces for their teams. And you say, well, Shelton, how do they do this? I will tell you, these changes internally, people want to see systemic changes. If there are barriers to inclusion and equity in how people are hired, how people are promoted, how people are developed, paid, given bonuses, people want to see changes in those systemic processes that I think over the years we've gotten away from our annual analysis to see if it was inclusive or if we used to do these equity studies. I think we've gotten away from that. So one of the other things that I think I'm the most proud of is our clients have not only wanted to implement actionable, measurable actions, but they wanted those actions to be sustainable. And they say, Shelton, how do we do that? I said, so let's bring in some external accountability. So I 3 clients have instituted external diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory groups made up of prominent individuals in their communities, stakeholders, suppliers, partners, to hold them accountable for not just having conversations. And the conversations is the place to start. So that employees can share what's in their heart, what's in their minds, that they've been prevented from and discouraged from sharing before. But then you have to take action, and you have to do 2 things. Involve the people that are most impacted in the situations, involve them in the actions, and then those that may not be directly involved in addressing the issues, make sure you're communicating to everyone and saying, this is what we think we heard you say need to change. Here's what we've done. Is it in fact making a difference? Do we need to have course corrections? And so again, I would encourage, and again, for those that will connect with me on LinkedIn, I will send you links to, I think it was Miranda that talked about these CEOs having these conversations. I can send you a link to one of my clients having that sort of conversation. And you can see the body language and the discomfort. Other CEOs need to see it's okay. It's not going to be perfect. And so there's a number of different links and things we can send you so that you can share, because we need to remember we're all in this together, and we're only going to get better together. So I share those things with you.
Thank you, Shelton. And I want to build on a little bit of what you said and what Miranda said also, about some of the tools that you're giving people, facilitation tools and the like. I think a lot of what prevents us from having these kinds of conversations, not only in our workplaces, but in our social surroundings as well, is the fear of what might happen. What happens if things go wrong, if things get combative? What can we do? Like, how do we prepare for that worst case scenario? And what are some tips that you can share with people for taking those conversations back to that productive place? And Shelton, I'll ask you to start with maybe just a couple of specific tips that you can give.
So thank you for that. Like Miranda, we have, of course, courageous conversations, moving from awareness to action. And we tell people, it's very simple. Everyone in the conversation has to feel that it's safe to share their thoughts and feelings, and that they're going to be respected. Both individuals have to start with the right motives, and they have to stay focused. Most importantly, everybody has to be willing to work toward a positive outcome. And both people involved in the conversation have to care about the other person's interests and values. Each person has to treat the other with dignity and respect. But managers say, well, yeah, that sounds good for you, but how do you actually do it? Well, be authentic, be transparent, and don't be afraid of the heat. You're going to, this is not about being comfortable. If the conversation was comfortable, we would call it comfortable conversations, not courageous conversations. They're courageous, crucial, fierce conversations that's going to make everybody uncomfortable. Use that as a platform for change. Learn from it. Lean into the heat. And last but not least, don't get confused intent with impact. We tend to judge ourselves based on our good intentions. But my grandmama used to have a saying about that. She used to say, Toby, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's not about your intentions. It's about the impact that our behavior has on people. And you got to own that. The fact that you were unaware and the fact that you didn't intend it doesn't mitigate the impact. Accept and own that. That's my 2 cents.
Love it.
Susan, is there anything you'd like to share? I know, like you mentioned, we've been working together for a lot of years. I've been involved in some of those conversations where things got a little bit combative. What advice do you have for the folks listening today of what to do and how to diffuse those situations?
So my advice is to follow Shelton's grandmother's advice, right? So that's where I would start. Then the second part of that is, remember this: we are different yet the same. And so we may look different, we may come from different orientations and racial backgrounds and socioeconomics, but ultimately we all want the same thing. And Shelton, you said it is to be valued, is to be treated with dignity and respect. So if we start with that place, then you have the conversation. Right. Also acknowledge that, and I say this, we're diversity practitioners, but the world changes every day. So I don't have the same answers. The answers I had yesterday are changing every single day. Acknowledge that you don't know everything. And that you have to find cultural informants to help you. And so what my advice is to acknowledge that you don't know everything, that you have to find those places and those people who can help you. But then always keep in mind is that we may look different, but we want the same thing. So when those conversations start to get out of hand, and oh, by the way, they can, then we have to de-escalate. And you have to go back to that place of, I hear you. I may not agree with you, but I hear you, and I will treat you with dignity and respect, and at least let your voice be heard. And try to avoid judging people who are different yet the same.
The judging, I think, is a big piece. Yeah. Andrea, anything you want to add?
Yeah, well said. I would say 2 things, and Shelton and Susan hit it spot on. But I would add to that the Ubuntu principle. If you don't know that, it's about one of their focus areas in that training and development practice is until I see you or until you see me, I don't exist. And so we have to get to a place where we, Susan said this, we have to see something, we have to do something, say something to get different results. And it's about bringing people into an existence no matter where you are. The second thing is the engagement model. We are engaging at different levels across this diversity maturity model and paradigm. Some people are still at the understanding and knowledge, and some are ready with awareness and appreciation, and others are at the influencing behavior and creating action. And I say no matter where you are on that engagement model, that's okay. Be comfortable with that. Find a mentor, a sponsor, find a how-to guide, a resource. Keep it simple. There are others that have developed great resources and practices. Lift from there and then learn and move forward. And the same way that you did in your learning consulting or learning sales or learning whatever your practice is, engineering or health or technology, it's the same thing with diversity. You got to start somewhere. But the associates are stating, until you see me, I don't exist. And so we have to start creating environments where everybody has a seat at the table. Everyone moves to mattering and to belonging and breaking through that approach. So I applaud what's been said, and I would just add that there is an engagement model that includes a lot of things, and you've got to get on that track and then just move through it as best you can so that we can end with creating actions for an inclusive environment.
And I see we've only got a couple minutes left, and I did want to leave time for questions. Crystal, are there any questions that our audience are asking of our panelists? I know we only have a couple minutes.
We have some awesome questions that are coming in, but for the most part, we don't have enough time to answer them. So if we could just let everyone have their final words, and then we will try to answer some of these at a later time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you could share those with us, we could put some answers together and send those out to you. So yeah, quick final word. Miranda, let's start with you because you didn't get to weigh in on that last question.
No worries. So final words, and I heard some of this already in the others, is really around be courageous. Just really be courageous. Lean into those feelings of discomfort, right? So again, we don't know everything, but don't let fear paralyze you from speaking up and engaging in conversations about race and equity. And then the other point that I heard Shelton say is, and as you do that, assume positive intent, but give grace. Because people may say some things that, may be abrasive or rub you the wrong way, but I would just say be courageous. Lean into it. We can't fix what we don't acknowledge. So we've got to start talking about it in order to take action.
Absolutely. Susan?
So this time has chosen all of us. Think about that. This time has chosen all of us, and we have chosen this work. And so we have to choose to make change. And we have to make change.
It's not a choice, actually.
No.
Oh,
Andrea?
well said. I would say curious, stay curious. Curiosity is key. And I think on both sides, we're feeling hurt, we're feeling pain. There's a lot of bitterness and frustration. And I say to all, whether you're an associate, employee, manager, or leader, stay curious in this process. We will push through, we will get through, we will bond, and we will build again, but stay curious.
Wonderful words. Thank you. And Shelton? Last word.
Yeah, listen and learn. Listen and learn. I know that if you're worried about the discomfort, the best way to lean into the discomfort is just listen with empathy and learn and then act. That's it.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
I want to thank all of you. This was a really important, powerful, and engaging conversation. And I do think we are at a really important time. I feel hopeful for the first time in many years. And I know there's a lot going on right now that can be disheartening, but I really am seeing people uplifting and getting involved in a way that I haven't seen before. And that's what I'm going to choose to hang on to and be part of. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank you.
afternoon.
Nice
Thank
job.
you for the opportunity.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.